What are the things you need to be freaking epic at? Hey, if I sat down and in 2 years and 3 years, I want someone to write about what made our company magical, it's because they were freaking epic at bam, bam, bam. That tells you what are the big buckets that you need to have really top-notch, amazing people owning.
How do you counsel people to make sure that they aren't getting screwed on the technology side of whatever their business is?
That's a great question. So, a couple of things. You're right. Like every company is a technology company, but I also challenge that a little bit because every company is also an HR company. It's a finance company. These are all things you have to do. The question is that going to be your core product or is there going to be something else? And I've seen a ton of entrepreneurs do amazing things on the back of really complex Excel spreadsheets and Google Forms. And you don't have to turn everything into a full software product. So I bump into a lot of entrepreneurs who assume they have to build this monolithic app and they have to have a team of developers. And it's like, no, you know what? Build it in Google Sheets and Excel and go try and sell the solution. Do that first. So we are in this amazing world right now where you can buy the components of your business and assemble them, like the HR tools and affiliate management, learning, like that's super cool. But I totally dodged your question. Like, how do you manage the quality of the product and things like that? The really big thing that I always recommend is that idea of testing early and testing often. Mm-hmm. Whenever I see entrepreneurs who are outsourcing work, maybe they've got a team in India or Vietnam, or they've got some co-ops here, or they've got the one brilliant whiz who's working on the weekends on the side. The big failing, what ends up happening is they've got this grand vision. And we're entrepreneurs, we do that. But you get this grand vision and you assume you need to have it all before you can bring it to customers. And what ends up happening is you've invested so much time and energy. And when you bring it to them, the reality is at the beginning of your entrepreneurial journey, you know the least. So your job isn't to build everything, it's to resolve the unknowns. So whatever you have as a first product, when you bring it to customers, there's going to be parts they like and parts that they crap all over. And ideally, you can minimize the amount of wasted money. So getting them in front of customers early, often, I mean, like every week, every day, if you get those customers who you can do that with, even if your developers are kind of moving in a different direction or you're investing a lot of money, you're reducing that downside risk significantly.
So, and I think that's a great answer, and I appreciate that. In other words, don't get too far down the line before you realize this isn't working. Because I've never tested it, right?
Totally. Yeah.
And so I'm curious then, do you, well, actually, let me backtrack or keep going through the story. So you met up this program and you guys started a business. Did you get money? Did you bring on funding, or is this self-started?
No. So our first few businesses have all been bootstrapped. So been there, done that, no money raised, borrowing money off your credit card to make payroll. You desperately need an office because you got to meet somebody somewhere, so you get the cheapest office you can. Yeah.
It's interesting because I live in, where do you live?
So just outside Toronto, Kitchener-Waterloo.
Okay. So I live in Utah. I live in Southern Utah, but about 4 hours north of me is what's known as the Silicon Slopes, around Lehigh, which is south of Salt Lake City. It's Utah County. And it's kind of the new hotbed of Silicon, software startups. And so I'm pretty familiar with that culture. I have friends up there. I have friends that work for those companies. I have friends that have founded those companies. And I'm curious your take on, and I love that you bootstrapped your business. By the way, I borrowed money I brought in investment capital for one business in my 20s that I wouldn't say it failed, but it kind of failed to launch. It sort of limped along for a few years and fizzled out. But any of the successful businesses I've had have all been bootstrapped, including the one I have right now, which is by far the most successful. So I have a particular view on bringing on investment capital, and especially being exposed to that culture up north here of like the mindset of this isn't my money. I'm tied to growth, not profits. Yeah. I'm competing along lines that actually don't pay anybody's bills unless there's more money to come down the road. It's kind of a funny money mindset versus my experience of bootstrapping. But I'm curious, I like to hear other people's opinions. What do you counsel people that have, an idea or a vision? Do you say, look, bootstrap it as long as you can, make it as hard as you can, make, the school of hard knocks as hard, and get knocked as much as you can? Or as soon as you can, go try to get help in the form of other people's money.
So I'm very much an engineer. So I always see these problems as like optimization problems. It's like I kind of run the math, I think of the model. It's kind of like when people say, hey, should I incorporate or should I do a partnership? The reality is these are all just different business entities, different structures to accomplish your end goal. Likewise, are you going to use your own cash? Are you going to borrow money? Are you going to raise venture capital? Do you want to crowdfund? Do you want to wrap a cryptocurrency into it and do some type of, token offering? These are all different ways to fund the company. None of them is inherently better or worse. However, some business models and structures lend themselves better to others. So, for example, venture capital. One of the things that venture capital does really, really well is it builds hype, it builds awareness, and it's a very tight ecosystem. So if your customers, your partners, your go-to-market can also be venture-backed software companies, then yes, if you bring in an investor, that investor can come along with like a couple of hundred customers and wow, really accelerate. But it forces a direction. On the flip side, there's other businesses where you don't need that type of kind of customer connection. You don't need the baggage that comes with venture-backed funding, and you can fund it just from customers, from partners, from your own money, in which case you get to keep more of that equity. And I don't say one is better than the other, but as soon as somebody assumes they need to do one, chances are they haven't actually thought it through. So like I see entrepreneurs who say, hey, I've got an idea, I've got an early process. How do I go about, connecting with VCs? Well, that's like that spider sense kind of tingly that, you probably haven't thought through what's the eventual end goal and the right way to finance this. Because there are so many different types of capital out there right now. And venture is just this very narrow slice.
That's a really great point. Yeah. And it's probably true. If it's a good business, there's going to be more than one way to make it work.
Totally.
It's not going to be, man, I got this great thing. If I could just find some venture money, no, if it's a great thing, there's going to be other ways. Before Joseph Fung was Joseph Fung, the successful entrepreneur, and Joseph was just a wide-eyed little boy wanting to do something in the world. and I'm curious how you found yourself doing, these off the beaten path, entrepreneurial things rather than kind of where most people end in a job somewhere.
Oh man, I love it. It's such a great question because it was totally, wide-eyed, naive Joseph. Because, in high school, everyone goes and gets a fast food job because it builds character, like go flip burgers, work the fryer, and totally did that. For me, it was Wendy's. And my parents are crazy, and they said, "Well, great, you can go flip burgers." Or I was a small kid, so I wasn't actually allowed to work the grill. I did the fryer, so they said you can go do that, or why don't you actually put your computer skills to the test. And my mother was a financial planner, and so she knew everybody. She knew all these entrepreneurs. They needed business cards and brochures and ads, and she's like, well, you can do that desktop publishing thing. Why don't you just go and bill yourself out at $50 an hour? And when you're in high school, you're thinking I can flip burgers or do $50 an hour. You're like, damn, I'm doing this. So I got my business cards, I got my name, did everything, and I haven't looked back. It's the only way to do it.
Wow. So your parents actually pushed you into entrepreneurship.
Oh, very much. They've always been very entrepreneurial. They did mechanical contracting, the ducts that Bruce Willis crawls through in all the movies. They would install that kind of stuff. And they were in financial services, and they've always been very entrepreneurial. And I think seeing me, waste time at a burger shack probably drove them nuts. So yeah, they're the ones who had me in that direction.
That's funny. My son, he was working, when was this? Maybe last summer. No, I guess last summer was pandemic. It wouldn't have been last summer, but it was in the last year or two. He was working at what's it called? One of those little drive up places where you drive up and they come out and take your order. It's kind of like a Sonic, like a drive-in. Yeah. It's not a Sonic. And I'm like, I'm his dad. I run an entrepreneurial training program. And I'm like, bruh, we can't have this. So now he works, now he's working for me. He's actually on the phones.
Oh, there you go. Nice.
Which you'd appreciate. He's on the phones doing, I would call it light sales. And he's not 18 yet. So we're not going to put him into heavy sales till he's 18, but
I'm looking forward to when I can send my kids out door to door to start building up those muscles.
Yeah. Oh, it's the best. It's the best. I just interviewed a guy earlier today who's, and I know uvaro, obviously the business you're in, which I want to talk about not only what it does, but why you did that rather than, I think you've done mostly tech and startup prior to that, or tech and software. The guy I was talking to earlier today, grew up with nothing. He was homeless. He grew up in Manchester, England, sleeping in the park with his mom. It was like 20 degrees. And this guy had nothing going for him until he learned to sell.
Yep.
He started selling timeshares, which is like the worst thing.
Oh man.
But
That's
he built
hard.
that muscle. He built that muscle. And, you know, now the guy's just made and lost millions. Like it's a, you know, swinging a yo-yo. And because he has that skill, he's like, oh, I lost it all, whatever. I'll just come up with a new thing and sell it again. Right.
It's amazing, that skill, like the sales skill, the entrepreneurial skill. It's like the best safety net, because, you know, when stuff goes sideways or stuff goes south or whatever metaphor you want to use, you're your own safety net. And it's such an amazing feeling of, like, you know, confidence and almost invulnerability. So it's such a great skill to have.
Wait, I like the way you just said that. You're your own safety net.
Totally.
You just totally pinpointed why I'm so passionate about this. Like, the reality is, I don't know if entrepreneur, you know, let's say your goal is to make $1 million.
Mhm.
I don't know if becoming an entrepreneur is a better or worse or statistically more or less probable way to make $1 million than going to work at Ernst and Young or, you know, depending what industry, you know, going to work at Hilton Hotels if you want to manage a hotel. Like, I don't know. I don't even think that's the point. I don't think it's about an income probability. I think it's about a downside certainty. You'll always be able to bounce if you can do this.
That's totally it. Like, I think the numbers, you're right. I'm pretty sure the numbers are, like, worse off for, you know, running your own company. But if you knock it out of the park, it's amazing. And you get to bounce. So you're not stuck. You have more optionality. Yeah.
It's like being a Navy SEAL walking into a bar. Like, if a fight breaks out, you're probably going to be okay.
One of the entrepreneurs that I know best, who amazing guidance. He talked about how when he sold his last company, he was working in this new company, and he would always move forward bravely with conviction, doing what he thought was right. Because worst case scenario, they're going to come out and fire him. He said, do whatever it is, because worst case scenario, they're going to fire you. And just the bravery with that statement, you know, it doesn't actually matter if I get fired. So you know what? Kind of, like, screw the consequences. I'm going to do what I think is right. And being able to move with conviction, it's compelling, it's liberating, and wow, it makes life so much easier. So
well, you said it makes life so much easier. I actually just think it makes life. I don't think the other is actually living. I think it's just hanging on.
Nice. Good call. I love that.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if it's a personality quirk or a chromosomal anomaly or, you know, being some kind of, you know, malcontent, you know, I maybe have a personality disorder. I don't know. I could not effing work for someone else telling me what to do and making me wrong for doing what I think is the right thing to do. Couldn't do it.
It's so funny because my wife and I couldn't be more polar opposites. I don't know if you see the same thing in your relationship, but I mean, I'm a repeat founder, tech, CEO, throw my own money into it. Let's go. And I feel safer. And my wife works for the federal government, and she's in a job with the, you know, the pension, the administration, the all of that. And it makes her feel safer. And I would feel so terrified about doing that because you'd have no control, you know, no direction. So
yeah, exactly. So, okay. So you started, let's kind of get into the story. I mean, you started at a young age, desktop publishing. So were you making websites, or were you actually like printing brochures, or like, what was the early taste?
All the early stuff, from like designing ads for newspapers, printing brochures, printing business cards, getting really innovative, and printing magnets. Like, ooh, that was big. So yeah, a lot of the basics. So during college, ended up doing a lot of online open source programming. So like literally coding with strangers all around the world. You know, that stereotypical engineering nerd who's in the basement, doesn't really want to make friends. Yeah, that was me.
Okay.
And when we found out that one of the other lead programmers lived in the same city as I did, I mean, it was terrifying. It was like, oh, it's real. These people are real. Right. We said we were going to meet up. It was terrifying because that was the time when people were like, hey, don't meet someone from the internet. That's dangerous.
Right.
When we realized we're in the same town, we realized, hey, we actually should do this and earn money. And so we did a lot of the open source free software we were building and turned it into a business. And you know, that was in web content management. And then we ran a couple of companies afterwards. And it was a good way to kind of build that founder ecosystem. So
let me ask you this then. Let me kind of ask you to pretend you weren't you for a second, because, you know, and kind of in service to my audience, you know, I have an audience of what I would call and I use this term with so much love because I think this applies to myself too, everyday entrepreneurs.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is we didn't start with like a giant trust fund or a ton of money. Like we weren't able to just come in big and, overspend. We didn't have the network or the connections to go, call up our buddy's dad at the bank or the fund and get a couple million to start playing around with. And we didn't have advanced technical skills. So we were always dependent on having to outsource that part of our business, which is a terrifying dependency.
Mm-hmm.
When you don't have even enough acumen to not only to do it yourself, but to even supervise it or quality control it yourself. You could spend your life savings with a developer just building you an app or a website and him disappear into the night and it doesn't do what it was supposed to do. And I don't think you can even sue him because it's so nebulous, right? Like, and so you had the advantage of let's say, that aptitude, right?
Mm-hmm. I had the privilege of being able to build the first version of whatever I was selling.
Right. And which by the way, props to you for acquiring that. I'm not saying, oh, that's not fair. I'm saying like, oh, that was genius.
It's tough.
Yeah, it's hard and you worked hard. So you bootstrapped your first few businesses and did you have some exits or liquidity events? Like how did you kind of springboard into the next phase?
Yeah, so we had the very first business. Again, we started with all this open source software. We were thinking about, hey, let's kind of open source, build a sense of community. We had hundreds of thousands of users around the world. It was great.
What space was that in?
So discussion forums. If you ever tried to run a forum on your website, you might have used some of the software we built. Super cool. Like, yeah. I mean, weird stuff. I mean, we had people running forums about everything from like video games to travel to unions. I mean, we had like Sony and the FBI reach out to us because they thought people were doing stuff with our software. It was weird. But when we tried to monetize it, when we tried to turn on our paid offerings, because the community was so used to free, it was just like this cultural dissonance and it couldn't work. So we ended up spinning it to a not-for-profit. The next company we did manage to sell. The third, we had it lined up to sale and the whole thing fell apart at the 11th hour. It was such a lesson. And I took a break. I worked with some NGOs, did some really cool international governance work, realized academics are fun and fascinating and I learned a lot, but that's not where I want to stay.
Right.
And so the fourth, again, was venture-backed, my first venture-backed company in the HR technology space. That one was a very successful exit. And then I got back into it a couple of years later.
Okay, so let me back up to...
I know I rambled. That was one hell of a
journey. No, that was, well, I mean,
–
it's one hell of a resume and what you look like you're like 24. So I don't know how you crammed all that in, but.
Lots of Coke, lots of this kind of Coke.
Well, I was going to say, whoa, you just went there. Plus I don't think that keeps you looking younger from what I hear.
No, I guess not.
But okay. So yeah, you mentioned one that fell apart at the 11th hour. My podcast is known whenever we sense that there's a horror story, that's what we like to dig into. So can you riff on that for a minute?
Oh man, it's funny. I look back at it now and I'm like, I learned a lot out of that process, but it sucked. So we were running, at the time, the company was called On My Block. Think of it as like a social network for your neighborhood. So before social networking was its thing. And it had...
Give me a time, like a date, what year?
Yeah, so this would have been like 03 to 07 kind of thing.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So really early, and we pulled in ton. It was, I mean, I look at it now, and in many ways, it was magical. We were pulling in automatic schedules, like who are your local counselors, garbage pickup schedules, bulletin boards for like dog walking. Sponsored by mostly like real estate agents, mortgage, the people who market your neighborhood. And there was a U.S. competitor that was, because we're Canadian. There was a U.S. competitor. Really, it was kind of like the two of us, and the team in Canada who was licensing the US brand. We were going to head in a lot of markets and we were doing really well. But the entrepreneurs who were licensing that brand decided, you know what, rather than paying these licensing fees to this US competitor, what if we just owned the business ourselves? And so they reached out to us to see if they wanted to acquire what we were doing. And it was a great opportunity because they knew the business, they knew the space, gave them a chance to, own it. And literally the day that we were traveling, like an hour down the highway to kind of meet, shake hands, hand over customer files, all that kind of stuff. Like literally we are taking boxes and putting them in the trunk of my tiny little Elantra. And we get this call saying, hey, our financing has fallen through. We're not going to be there to sign. Sorry.
Mm.
And it sucked. And we're going back through all the documents, like, what the hell? And we realized everything was signed and papered in this new corporation they were setting up. And so there was no way to really go back and chase this. And I mean, we could have tried to take them to court for it, and then the legal fees would have exploded, and we'd mentally disengaged from it because we were going to be handing it over. And I mean, the real tragedy about it is that because of this process, their relationship with the US vendor fell through. So they lost their licensing rights. Their money fell through. We ended up shuttering the company. Sucked. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. There's so many lessons. You know, I've had one exit, my last business, which was an agency, and I sold to one of these Silicon Slopes companies. And that was a shaky, I'll be kind of circumspect about it myself, but it was not a perfect execution exit. And I learned a lot about these little gotchas. And in fact, that one actually involved a deal where there was it was an entity liquidating assets to another entity. And then the entity that I had sold to, there was no recourse because there was nothing in that entity anymore. And it's funny, these little, they're not, I don't know if it's quite fair to call them shell games, but they play out the same.
It plays out like a shell game. And what I realized is we made those mistakes because we'd never gone through before. So we didn't have any idea on how things could go wrong. And that gave me a lot of respect for bringing in more experienced executives because they just seen more things go wrong.
Yeah.
And that's always really helped us out. So
yeah, we're building a program inside of Entre now, and it's a long project. It'll probably be late next year before it materializes really, but working with a guy that, you know, is an early stage investor, brings companies all the way through to exit and oversees the entire transaction and dots all the I's and crosses all the T's and brings in the legal and the accounting. And he's a very active, hands-on investor. And we're going to be nurturing companies inside of Entre that seem like they have that potential. Everything from, you know, bridge funding to transaction consulting, pre-transaction consulting. And it's like, you just got to go find guys that have been doing it for 20 or 30 years because they've forgotten more stuff than, you know, most people will ever learn. And totally. It's just, I'll never hear all the possible things that can go wrong. There's just so many.
Yeah. And if you get somebody at the right point in their career journey, there's this amazing arbitrage opportunity. Like, so with our last company, we needed a head of sales and marketing. It's so funny. I mean, I run a sales school, but I didn't come through it as a sales leader. I was always the CEO, the founder, and you got to sell, but it's not the same as, you know, someone who's built sales and marketing teams. So we need to bring this guy in. And I mean, I interviewed people in New York and San Francisco and Toronto, and we knew, like, wherever we found this person, we're going to set up shop. We got this guy, Mark Alley, who is 3 times head of sales and marketing. And he knew that his next thing was going to be running his own company, you know, CEO, doing that. That was his career trajectory. And effectively, we got to rent his expertise for a couple of years, and it was transformative for the company. I mean, he gave so much value. He joined us as a head of sales and marketing, but he became a co-founder just in terms of that ethos, that vibe, that dynamic. And we benefited from a company. He got to join us during that trajectory, which set him up really well for his next role. And I mean, now there's no way I could hire somebody with that kind of, you know, knowledge and expertise. His company is 300, 400 people. They're crushing it. And he saved our bacon in so many ways. That experience is gold.
So you mentioned head of sales and marketing. It's funny you say that. We, and now I'm venturing into basically asking, I'm getting your insight because for consultative purposes, I'm going to like totally apply it.
Oh, totally. For sure.
For myself. Hope you don't mind. Send me a bill later. Because
it's all for the audience. I'm sure, you know, people have got the exact same challenge.
Exactly. Well, I mean, and here's actually, I will tell you, I'll tell the audience, you know, when we grew just for context, we grew our company, Entre Institute. We grew literally but just shy of 4,000% last year.
That's amazing. That's great.
From monthly, you know, January 2020 to January 2021, month over month growth was 4,000% top line growth. And the pandemic helped. I mean, a lot of people went online, looking to learn these online skills and how to start a business or whatever. And so, but thankfully 2 years prior to that, we had begun building and getting in the infrastructure and the scalability to be able to handle that influx and not explode. But we still, we've spent the rest of this year now backfilling, systems and competencies and hiring and,
Yep.
and so forth. But one of the things we did when we were trying to go from, 1 to 100 really fast was we went from having basically no org chart or very loose org chart to, because we went from like less than 10 employees to about 100 in a year.
Wow.
And so we're like scrambling to like put people in boxes and organize things. And we initially landed on like 5 departments, which were sales, marketing, operations, admin, and tech. And we've recently consolidated down to 3, where we've moved tech under operations. We've converted admin into basically admin, HR, finance. Because when we started admin, we didn't even have HR and finance because we weren't big enough to really need that officially. And then we've the reason I'm saying this is we've collapsed sales and marketing into basically what we call our revenue department.
Totally.
And I'm curious your thought on that. Because you mentioned head of sales and marketing. And so my ears perked up immediately, like, oh, maybe you think the same way, that our initial experience and to the beginning entrepreneur out there who may not have a big org chart or a lot of people, I think this is still a valid thing to consider, is that a lot of time there's a little bit of a disconnect between sales and marketing. And what we realize is that when your salespeople aren't in the conversation of what's being said out front, and when your marketing people aren't in the conversation of what's being said on the phone, you have potential dissonance and a potential bad customer experience. Is that, I mean, you agree, I presume.
I agree with the statement.
Okay.
I wouldn't say that I'm pedantic about sales and marketing being in the same organization. It's the same thing. It's like that engineering head kind of comes back. That same argument, the same comment about like, hey, if marketing is moving in one direction and sales is moving in another, you're screwed. Well, that same argument applies to, well, if sales are moving one direction and your implementation or your customer success team is moving in a different direction, well, you're screwed.
Right.
Okay. And then same thing is the people who are implementing your tool are moving in one direction and your tech or your product team are moving in a different direction. Well, you're screwed. Okay. So now it's all like this contiguous thing and everything has to roll up to one. Oh, hey, that's why you have a CEO. What I believe is when you need to split up your organization, you need to define it. The right starting point is kind of sit down as a CEO, think about the company you want to build, what it's going to be, and what are the things you need to be freaking epic at. It's like, hey, if I sat down and in 2 years and 3 years, I want someone to write about what made our company magical, it's because they were freaking epic at bam, bam, bam. That tells you what are the big buckets that you need to have really top-notch, amazing people owning. And if your company, like your criteria to success are things like operational excellence, or if it's, hey, that kind of sales and marketing, like synergy, that's going to be super critical, or the engineering, the product technical excellence, that'll tell you where the buckets are. And I'll say what that means. Like for our last company, the way we sold, we focused exclusively on inbound marketing. We knew that we had to be really good at a touchless sale. So our marketing team had to effectively be our sales team. And yeah, we'd have some salespeople, but it had to be, lockstep. That made sense to keep it as a revenue team, RevOps, all of that. A ton of people are doing that. That's great. With our current company, we know that we need to be exceptional at marketing, and it actually has to be different from being exceptional at sales, because we have to reach our clients, like the people who come through our program. By and large, they're kind of mid-20s to mid-30s. They tend to be single. A lot of them have worked in service. So they're solopreneurs. There's about 72 million Americans who fit that profile. Like, it's a big category. We have to be amazing at marketing to get to our audience. We also do sales training. We have to be amazing at sales.
Right.
So we see them as 2 separate buckets in this company. And so I think you got to choose that North Star, like what you want to be really remembered for. And your comments about consolidating that down to 3 groups sounds like you really have that clarity, and that's really awesome.
Yeah. It emerged because we have frankly a pretty integrated marketing and sales experience where you're still being marketed to as the sale is happening, and you're being sold to while the marketing is happening, and there's really no clear seam between the two. So, but that's a great perspective. Yeah. And that is, I think you've multiple times now touched on what makes entrepreneurship so cool and also so hard, which is that like eventually the formulas all break down against it's like no battle plan survives contact with the enemy, right? Like
Totally.
the market eventually challenges every assumption.
So the one thing I will share with that this is not blowing smoke or kind of pumping your tires, but evidence that you're making the right choice. Everything that's in vogue right now talks about like revenue ops. You have a revenue organization in terms of all everything you described. The folks at Go Nimbly, amazing consultancy. They run the revenue operations for all of the biggest SaaS companies. They have an obscene number of $1 billion of recurring revenue that they manage. Go Nimbly. Interesting thing is that they know you could take the exact same spend in technology, in tools and systems, and if you flip it into more of a revenue operations approach, really thinking about the sales marketing group holistically, you increase your revenues by 26% using the same spend. So, I mean, if you're looking for some data, that's like all the biggest SaaS companies are working with them, and that's a great data point. That's a good sign that they know what they're doing.
Hey, sorry for the interruption. I just wanted to let you know you can get a free copy of my book, The Millionaire Shortcut, which shows you the fastest way to become a millionaire in the new economy. And there's a special link just for this episode in the description. So thanks for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the episode.
Yeah, that's huge, and that passes my sniff test for experience in the last 12 months where you can never afford to stop asking the sales and marketing question really at any point in the customer journey.
Totally.
Because here's the reality, and this is like newsflash to a lot of people. People love buying stuff.
Yeah.
They love buying more stuff. They love adding on more features. They love I don't want to say they love being upsold, but they love up buying. So the day you separate them out, you go, okay, they're out of the sales and marketing, they're out of the revenue category now, and now we're just fulfilling. You're actually neglecting them.
I love those really memorable quotes that help you kind of point at a North Star. Two that I've received from two of my mentors. Number one is, as CEO, as a founder, your number one job is cash the check. Make it really, really easy for people to buy. Make it easy for them to find you, to cash the check. And then the second one, speaking of your comment there about customers implementation, customers are like trees. If they're not growing, they're dead. So they got to be getting more value, buying more from you, and you got to help them realize those benefits. Otherwise, they're just waiting to leave.
I'm writing that down. Customers are like trees.
That's our customer excellence.
This is why I started a podcast. It's like, it's just free consulting. It's amazing. No, thank you. That's tremendous. So, okay. First of all, I want to talk about uvaro, but first I want to just ask you, because we love good drama on this show. Give me a really gnarly experience from your entrepreneurial journey. Give me one of those things that's just going to scare people off from ever wanting to go this road with us.
Oh, I love that question. Scare people off.
That make them keep their day jobs.
So our last company, HR software, Tribe HR, we sold it to NetSuite, amazing software company. I love the team at NetSuite. This is a horror story, but I want to preface it. I love the team there, tons of respect. They've run great software, great company. A smarter entrepreneur than I once said, I've never met an entrepreneur who regretted selling their business. And that was great. And so you get that exit opportunity. That's really fun, life-changing for you, your family, your parents. Yeah, all that's great. But they had an investment banker in the process. And the iBanker, their job is to make sure the deal happens and get the price as low as possible.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is if he could shave $1 million off the deal, he gets, a nice commission check. He's done his good job. Like, that's his job. So really the way we described it is his job was to be a professional asshole. And
for everybody's perspective, he's basically trying to beat you up into accepting conceding a lower valuation for your company, so his client NetSuite can get a better deal.
Effectively. And I mean, that's his job. And I look at this now and I'm like, okay, I feel better about it now, but I've had years to separate myself from it. I mean, literally I had calls with my board where, he'd call me at a random hour, like waking me up super, super early, yelling at me about how the deal would go, and then hang up on me. And I'm thinking, oh my God, the deal's falling apart. I call the board and I'm like, hey, heads up, this thing is probably not going to happen. It's like, well, did he say it's done? I'm like, well, no, he just yelled at me. And like, great, it's moving along well. Like, what the heck? And I mean, literally, I mean, personal attacks. Like, you can't say this after you said this. What kind of a man are you, Joseph? Like,
Right.
what the hell? Like, and that was really tough because as somebody who cares deeply about my people, like my customers, my staff, I can never imagine like yelling or attacking somebody like that on the phone. And so I could only assume that I was doing this wrong, and I didn't know what I was doing. And man, everything from like I wasn't eating right, I was struggling with sleep, all of that, and realized at the tail end of it, like all of the hallmarks, like from the gaslighting to the yelling, it was like an abusive relationship during the most challenging decision I'd ever made. And yes, that was tough. So,
he had power. He had the power. That's the fuel of abuse, right?
Totally. And the reality is I gave it to him because I didn't know what to expect.
Mm-hmm.
I really didn't. And I don't think my investors fully realized how much I was struggling with it. I'm lucky. I loved my investors on my board and they were there to support me. But I didn't realize what was going on. And so now when I'm working with companies, one of the things I try and watch for is just the mental health of the entrepreneurs, because like in the moment, I couldn't realize what I was experiencing. It was only afterwards. I'm glad when I can offer that type of support for the entrepreneurs I work with.
I'm glad you said that. I'm glad you broached that. I know that, talking about mental health now is like kind of this, it's like this, forgive the term, but it's like this woke thing to talk about now. Right. But the reality is, cultural movement or not, it's a really legit thing with entrepreneurs because, I actually have a friend of mine, somebody I've gotten really close to this year, who is, he was the commander of all the Navy SEAL teams across the Middle East for 11 years. Mm-hmm. And he led more successful SEAL missions than any SEAL in history. I mean, this guy's, we talk about mental health, we talk about trauma, we talk about abuse, right? And he said, and he works now, he consults founders, CEOs, and hypergrowth entrepreneurs. And he's like, you're the closest thing I can find to work with to me in terms of the weight you carry, the burden you bear, the flack you take, and the trauma and the traumatic, his definition of traumatic stress is when your body and your mind subconsciously adapts to a certain environment, and then the environment changes, and that set of adaptive processes no longer serves you in the new environment. And he's like, nobody deals with more rapid and dramatic environmental change than entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you said that. And for the audience out there, like, this isn't like stuff that makes you weak to talk about and care about. It actually will make you better to be proactive in sort of nurturing yourself and your team. Because I mean, even me, last month I was at a clinic in Massachusetts doing essentially neurological regeneration, but trying to like, how you cut the split ends off of your hair when it gets too long? I was essentially cutting the scorched ends off of my neurons in my brain because I've been pushing so damn hard. Like, this is real stuff.
It is tough. And I shared the stories because, again, while I was in it, I wasn't recognizing what was going on. Like, I remember there was about a 6-month period where my phone would ring and I could feel my heart rate would just suddenly spike, and I'd be hesitant to pick up my phone because of who it was. And I thought
this was after. You're talking about
after.
So this is post-traumatic stress. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, keep in mind, like, the deal is closed. I have millions of dollars in my bank account. My parents' mortgage is paid off. Like, my wife and I are saying, you know what? If our kid never has to, like, if something's wrong and they don't have to work, they'll be okay. Like, I've got every reason to be delighted, but every time my phone would ring, I'd have a panic attack. And I just thought I was too busy. And in the moment, like during the event, I remember one call, I had left a team meeting because I had to take a call, because we're going through all of this. I can't tell them what's going on because we're selling the company. And again, yelling, angry conversation. And I had to go back in because we had a team meeting, like with lunch, where we're doing team building. And literally, I went and I puked in the bathroom and had to get myself all back up and positive energy to go back into this team meeting. And at the time, I'm thinking I'm pushing myself too hard, not realizing what's happening is a side effect of these dynamics that we set entrepreneurs up for. And I never spoke about that with anyone before the event, so I had no idea what to watch for. I just thought that was part of the journey. And I look at it back now and I'm like, oh, that's ridiculous. So if someone hears this and goes, hey, I can watch for those things, that's good. And if anyone's going through that kind of crap, they can always hit me up. I'm happy to be a sounding board and complain about somebody who's treating you badly during a transaction.
Yeah, well, actually, that's super gracious of you, because I'll bet somebody is going to hear this. That's like,
Oh,
ooh,
for sure.
that feels familiar. But although in respect to Joseph, like, let's be gentle. He's not a therapist. Let's not start calling him because we're fighting with our sister or whatever. Okay, so I want to talk about Uvaro. I'm really fascinated by this. Again, being in proximity to Silicon Slopes, I know Uvaro. Correct me if I'm wrong, but basically, you guys train and you breed and produce technology salespeople, right?
That's it.
Which can be in office or a lot of times work from home, right? Remote.
Totally.
Yeah. And I see a lot of tech sales up in Lehigh, and I know that there's a huge need for it. I also know there's a huge lack of I would say properly trained talent for it. There's also a lot of clumsy management of it, because a lot of tech founders aren't. I mean, they'll either they're not sales guys and they try to be, or they'll bring in like a brutish sales guy that just kind of beats people up. Anyway, I'm sure you could go off about all that, the whole culture of it. But first of all, how'd you get into this? I mean, you're a software and technology guy.
Yeah. So, I mean, I run a few software companies, and building the sales side of things was always the toughest challenge. Great VC talked about every software company is a 2-engine plane. You're either building product or selling it, and you got to have both engines running. And for me, I mean, I'm a technologist, so the building always felt easy and familiar. The selling was always outside my comfort zone, where I had to stretch, where I had to build. I always assumed it was me. I really assumed that was where the challenge was. Our most recent software company was a company that built sales playbooks. So if you imagine, instead of giving your sales team a bunch of slides and videos to memorize, you give them a cheat sheet that updates itself. Super cool. We've got like 14,000 sales reps who use it, 2,000 organizations, super cool technology. As we talked to our best customers, the ones buying the most software, growing the fastest, we heard they all had the same problem. Hiring sales reps was miserable, making them successful was painful. And I mean, beyond the catharsis of going, oh, it's not just me, everyone has this problem. We realized that's a problem that we can help solve, because we've always cared deeply about diversity and inclusion. And we saw it day after day. People who are amazing sales reps, maybe in insurance or in their own company or fitness or finance, and they go and they apply to a job at a software company, and a head of sales says something stupid like, oh, you called it SaaS instead of SaaS. Clearly you don't get tech. Thank you, but we're going to move forward with another candidate.
Right.
And that just pissed me off too much. So we said we had to solve it. And so we launched a program to help give people the lingo, the tools, the technology, and help them crush interviews. And it has been amazing. We've changed so many lives. And I love tech. I love building tools. And I've never run a company where people have told us so often, you've saved my life, you've changed my life, cried on the phone in joy. And wow, making a difference like that is just so impactful. I can't imagine doing anything else now.
So I'm picturing, man, I'm seeing the use case of like, you've got people that are great at sales, but they're in, let's call them anything from archaic to slightly less sexy industries than technology. Totally. What the guy that maybe sold refrigerators or encyclopedias door to door, all the way up to a guy that sells cars or sells maybe sells some cool stuff, but it's not quite as cool, or maybe there's not quite as much money in it. And you're taking that guy who knows how to sell but doesn't speak the language of tech and SaaS, and you're teaching him the lingo, and you're getting him hireable and ready to deploy in that space.
That's exactly, yeah. So I'll give you an example.
Which, I mean, based on my understanding, not to interrupt, but I mean, that's taking a guy with the same set. You're not changing his skill set, but you're probably doubling his income potential in a lot of cases.
So we add some skills in terms of the technology, in terms of some industry knowledge. So I'd say there's a bit of buffing, because the reality is most enterprise software is sold the same way. So there's a bit of kind of polishing we could do on the edges. But really, it's about helping people know how to position themselves, know how to walk the talk, that kind of stuff. And yeah, our average grad is increasing their income 2.2 times.
Wow. So I wasn't wrong at all. You're literally doubling what people can make, just with basically the same set of skills, but with some new, kind of nuances.
Totally. So one example that comes to mind. So I don't want to misrepresent. We do also have a lot of people who've just come out of school, or they were in an entirely different industry.
Okay.
So we've had, people who've been working oil fields, cap and gas caps, and worried about losing their lives, now selling HR software from the comfort of their living room. And as they transition, they'll typically start in a more junior sales role, but now they've got a much different career path and tons of growth. For the people who come and have that sales experience, you're talking about a monumental shift. So one of our recent grads, I love this success story. This is so good. He's in Atlanta. So he's in the Georgia area, and he's been selling construction and roofing. And he's been a sales manager in the construction space and the roofing space, and interviewing in tech. And of course, everyone's saying, hey, you got to start at the bottom rung, put in your time, be a BDR. And even if you do that, like what, even if you race through the ranks, you're going to add like 10% to your salary every year. Like if you did that for 5 years, that'd be amazing. But still, starting at that level is not going to work for him and his family.
Right.
And so we've been working with our team to position himself, target the right companies. And just last week, got an offer at 175K, like life-changing. That kind of stuff is amazing. And we get to hear those stories all the time. That's pretty cool.
Wow. That's really cool. Especially, and I kind of mentioned this to you earlier, I think a lot of people that are looking for that change in opportunity maybe glorify or romanticize the idea of becoming a full-on entrepreneur, full-on founder, starting their own business, controlling, being responsible for everything. And as they get into it, it can be kind of daunting to, realize there's a whole org chart and it all reports to you. And you have to, especially in the early going, you kind of got to be the smartest guy in every room until you're able to attract people smarter than you in those competencies. So they end up going, well, man, is there any way I can still have some of the autonomy or career flexibility or upside potential, but without having to do all of it? And they want to specialize. And I could list 100 people that I know from my career in the online education space who that thing that they've gravitated towards is sales. Totally. They're good on the phones, but there's never really been, that I know of, a formal, actually I'd say that. I mean, there's programs online that are called things like high ticket closers and places where you go to do high ticket selling online. But and those are good programs, although a lot of the opportunities those people end up in can be kind of sketchy because it's like high ticket online coaching programs and stuff. But really technology sales is where the upside opportunity meets the legitimacy.
Yes.
Rather than selling, $50,000 coaching programs online for a company that might be gone in 6 months. Your company seems to fill a huge need, even potentially for entrepreneurs that want to turn into specialists.
It's a massive gap. So the software industry, like, just kind of put some numbers around it. Over the next decade, is going to grow. Again, these are the most conservative estimates, 20% a year, over a year for the next decade. That'll get it to 800 billion in revenue. And the space right now, like, to get to that's going to drive the need for another 360,000 software sales reps that don't exist. And no one's teaching sales. Like, less than 2% of colleges have any kind of sales program. It's usually, one course and a marketing degree. So, I mean, yeah, huge demand. The part that I love about it, and this is the entrepreneur in me, and maybe to kind of your audience, is a lot of those high ticket things feel like shilling something people don't need. When you're selling tech to businesses, your job's not about shilling something because it's all subscription. If they don't actually need it, they cancel. And then you're out of commission and the company's pissed. Your job is to find problems that you can solve. If they don't have a real problem you can solve, you got to stop wasting time with them. And so really, you're out there hunting problems, asking people if they've got a problem, and only the problems that you can fix. And so you're fixing problems all day. It feels like being a hero. It's like the best job. I love it.
Yeah, that's a really, really great point. And I have my own bone to pick with the high ticket online, sales thing, because we're in an industry where I think we fight a perception bias. We're online entrepreneurial education, and we do have pretty expensive programs with, kind of hands-on coaching and a mastermind program and stuff. And so we have to fight the bias that we are, potentially we're shilling something people don't need. But it's exactly what you just said. And to anybody out there that wants to make a lot of money in sales, whether you're working for me or Joseph or anyone else, what you just said, I mean, that's it. You have to put yourself in a position where the financial opportunity is directly and invariably linked to the requirement of identifying people with legitimate problems and helping them solve them, period. That's at the end.
Totally.
You find a company that will pay you well to do that, you will have a bright future, a great opportunity, and you'll feel really great about what you do. But anything where where they're talking about, well, no, we need you to stoke the pain. We need you to twist the knife a little bit. We need you to get them. That's the warning sign right there, you know?
All of that. And the best part about it is when you find the right company, and there's tons of them out there. There's so many out there. You feel so much better. Like another one of our students, he spent 20 years a pastor. So he's just out of the New York area. 20 years. That was his professional career. He was a pastor. So, working in a congregation, helping his flock. And he really wanted to help people accomplish their dreams. And I'm sure you see this every day, Jeff. You get a chance to help someone realize their dreams. That's so fulfilling. He's now selling software primarily to entrepreneurs, helping those entrepreneurs fulfill their dreams and building their companies. And he gets to talk to them about how would they rather spend their time? How would they like to make an impact? And he gets to make a difference every single day. And halfway through our program, he comes to us and says, hey, you know what? I've never felt more human. And for people who have an idea of like sales being Glenn Gary, Glenn Ross, kind of stereotypical you salesperson, like think about that. That's a very different story. And yeah, that's fun because you get to see people realize and light up like that. And that's cool.
Well, so when we decide to take Entrasoft to the public market, I'm actually curious. I mean, you'd be a good guy to call and say, hey, we're ready to build a sales team. I mean, we have a funnel builder software that, we're only promoting internally inside of our community right now. But when we're ready to go public, like you'd be the guy to call to say, hey, we want to build a team, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. Every month we're graduating teams of, job ready software sales reps. Happy to hook you up, Jeff.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool, man. I love the gap you're filling. It's so huge. And I, off this podcast, we can talk, but I know 10 companies that if they're not already talking to you, they probably should be. So this is so cool, man. Congratulations on just everything you're doing and staying a really kind, decent human being amidst and despite all your success.
Well, thanks, Jeff. It's nice being able to make a difference. And if I can help somebody learn from my mistakes, then that's a good thing. So I'm happy to do that.
How can the world come find you? Where would you like them to go? Whether it's to learn from you, buy from you, so forth.
Learn, buy, connect. You can always hit us up on our website, uvaro, uvaro.com. And me personally, I'm on most social media channels, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, all at Joseph Fung, one word. Feel free to hit me up.
I'm looking at uvaro.com. So it says there's no upfront cost. Is that basically saying that you get paid if and when they land employment?
Yeah. So we're really firm believers in meeting customers where they're at. Like you said, hey, if you're trying to push something that doesn't work out, that's not good. So yes, people can choose to pay upfront. So that's an option. We've got a 2-year flat rate subscription if people want to just put it monthly. But also if people are in a tight spot, they don't have the freedom to just start paying for that kind of subscription. We also have an income share agreement where they don't start paying until they're working full time. And then it's actually geared to income. So yeah, There's no upfront payment required.
Wow. That's really putting your money where your mouth is, literally.
It is. I mean, we need to make sure people are crushing it in sales. Otherwise we're not getting paid. And wouldn't it be amazing if more higher ed did something like that? So yeah, we're trying to break the mold.
Amen to that. Well, thank you. We're 5 minutes past our cutoff time, and I'm grateful for the time. I'm grateful that you made the time to be here and for all the value from the Millionaire Secrets. I guess that's it. Any final thoughts or words?
Other than, if people are out there kind of fighting the good fight, building their business, it's worth it. Keep it up. It's so worth it.
If you love entrepreneurship, then you'll want to keep watching. So click the next interview right here for some more Millionaire Secrets gold. Thanks for watching.
Pricing is literally just a myth. If somebody's willing to get from where they're at to where they're trying to go and you're going to help them get there, what's more painful, paying you to help them get there or staying stuck where they're at?